Hello, everyone. I feel extremely privileged and honored to welcome you all on behalf of ELTAI, English Language Teachers Association of India's 83rd webinar on the art and science of storytelling. I also extend a warm welcome to our today's speaker, Dr. Haritha, our moderator, Dr. Maithry Shinde, and the two students discussants, Ms. Sheema Mustafa and Ms. Surya Meghana. Before moving on to the program, may I request everyone to watch the promotional video of ELTAI. Welcome back. A quick couple of announcements. Please make use of the chat box and post your queries and questions. Your questions will be answered by the speaker during the Q&A session. Do not share your personal details like mail IDs and phone numbers in the chat box. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Maithry Shinde. Dr. Maithry Shinde has over 2 decades of experience in teaching English language, literature, and soft skills at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels. She authored a book titled Ethnicity in Afghanistan Literature in June 2021. Currently, she is authoring a book on life skills in collaboration with Cambridge University Press. Her wide teaching experience has given her scope to hold several administrative positions: Head Department for English, Head Department of Humanities, Member Board of Studies, Coordinator for IQAC, and Member of the Governing Body. She is an ardent researcher and has works published on women issues, ethnicity, partition literature, and soft skills. In the course of her career, she has authored book chapters in prescribed textbooks for Osmania University and Dr. Ambedkar University. She is currently the head Department of English and Languages at St. Mary's College, affiliated to Osmania University. We welcome you once again, ma'am. The floor is yours now.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful introduction. Welcome all of you to this 83rd webinar of English Language Teachers Association of India. Now, the theme for today's webinar, the art and science of storytelling. Storytelling is ancient as human race itself. The objectives or purpose of storytelling has been myriad, be it communicating, educating, or instilling morals or values. The entertainment factor has been at the crux of this very interesting repertoire, be it the Burakatha, the Katha Kalakshepam, or the Kathakali, the miracle plays, so on and so forth. The list is endless. This very interesting discourse has made a lasting impact in the minds and hearts of people. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together to listen to what Dr. Haritha has to say. Before I hand over the session to Dr. Haritha, let me introduce our resource person for the day. Dr. G.Haritha formerly worked as the Assistant Professor of English, St. Francis College for Women. She taught English language and literature for both students at the UG and postgraduate level. She published chapters in 2 books and 14 papers at national level. She conducted 5 workshops, 2 Dakshat group institutions. She is currently a course writer at Professor Ramakrishna School of Distance Education, Osmania University, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, Hyderabad, and also Dr. Ambedkar University, Ahmedabad. Now, we also have 2 student discussants for our webinar today. May I take the pleasure of introducing Ms. Sheema Mustafa, who is studying at St. Francis College for Women. She is doing her undergraduate program in history, is an NCC cadet. She represents include dancing, playing ukulele, swimming, volleyball, and traveling. She is ambitious to join the civil services and serve the nation. May I take the pleasure of welcoming our second student discussant, Surya Meghana Atmakuri. She is also pursuing her UG program in history, political science, and public health from St. Francis College. She's also writing a research paper on study of indicators and functioning of model villages in India. She wants to pursue her master's in government and citizen. A very mindful Tita.
Thank you, Dr. Maithry. Good evening, my dear friends who are all in the session today. Let me start with an activity along with my students. I would like Sheema and Surya to be available on the screen. Yeah, can I have the presentation up?
Yes, ma'am. One second.
Good evening, Sheema and Surya.
Good
Welcome to
evening,
the
ma'am.
session today.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening.
My dear students, if you're going through a challenging time or desperately trying to achieve a goal, this class is for you. Remember the points. Point number 1, always remember that necessity is the mother of invention. In moments of difficulty, you have to rise to the challenge. That's your point number 2. Your point number 3, if you aim to get the result you need, think out of the box. Point number 4, never give up how difficult the situation turn out to be. And my 5th point, if at first you don't succeed, try. Try again. And eventually, after trial, error, frustration, and failure, you will get the result. And my last point to you is use creativity and intellect to solve your problem. Surya, can I ask you to quickly recapitulate what I told about the 6 points?
Yes, ma'am. What I understood from the lecture is that when you're facing a problem, you have to be creative and smart to solve it and never give up until you succeed.
Wonderful. So, Sheema, I have another task for you. The task goes like this. Listen to this carefully. It was a hot summer's day. A thirsty crow flew into a village in search of water. The crow flew over the houses, fields, and trees, but he did not find water anywhere. After a very long time, he came across a farm. Under one of the trees of the farm, there was a pitcher of water. Happy that he found some water, finally he swapped down to the tree and down to the ground. He quickly moved towards the pitcher and looked inside. There was very little water in the pot. The crow put his beak inside the pitcher but could not reach the water. The water level was very low. The narrow opening prevented his neck going down all the way. He tried to push the vessel down to let the water out, but it was too heavy. The crow was thoroughly disappointed. He was really thirsty and needed a drink of water badly. He could have given up and flown to another farm that's nearby looking for water, but he didn't do that. Instead, you know what he did? He looked around and thought, what else can I do? He saw that there are a lot of pebbles on the farm, and he had an idea instantaneously. He collected a pebble and put it in the pitcher. He collected another pebble, another, and put them all into the pitcher. As he added more and more stones, the water came up to the brim. The crow drank the water and flew home happily. So, Sheema, what do you think about this story?
Yes, ma'am. I could see in the story, ma'am, that Crow solves his problem with a simple and inspired solution. The story makes me realize that success is usually a result of creativity, a critical thinking combined with trial, error, and effort, but not always good luck.
Right.
And I like this attitude of Crow, ma'am, and I can say that it's a jugaad way to get the result. He found a initiative, quick fix for the problem. And if we all are really determined to achieve something in our lives, and we will definitely find a way to achieve that.
Right. Thank you for that response, Sheema. My dear students who are out in this particular webinar today, I hope many of you are able to relate to this activity. Have you ever wondered how you could recollect the story of thirsty crow that was narrated to you during your childhood days and not remember the steps of the Pythagoras theorem, or for that matter, the 6 points that I discussed about this Pythagoras theorem? It was a short question in the exam paper, right? You worked so hard to mug it up, you wrote it in the examination, you might have gotten good marks for that, but cannot recollect now. Do you know the reason why? Human brains are hardwired for narratives but not for facts. Let me clear this to you. How many here among the audience like listening to stories, and why? Can I see your responses in the chat box? Why do we like listening to stories, and why? Some responses that I can see in the chat box, please. Okay, let me clear this to you. According to Jonathan Goschel, we are, as a species, addicted to story. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories. Interesting, right? We're all aware that storytelling has a long history, with cave paintings in France dating back more than 40,000 years ago. It is not surprising that our brains are designed to remember engaging stories. Because stories have that amazing formula to move us to tears. They change our attitudes, our opinions, our behavior, whatnot. They inspire us, they change our brains, often for the better. Do you know how all this happens? It's not out of blue that it happens. I'm sure about that. There is science that's backing up, and that is brain science. Okay, let's do another simple activity to understand more about brain science. I call upon Sheema and Surya for this activity once again. Yes, Sheema and Surya, I have got two interesting stories for you today. Let me narrate it to you. My first story. There's a son who took his old father to a restaurant for evening dinner on his birthday. Father, being very old and weak, while eating, dropped food on his shirt and trousers. Other diners watched him in disgust while his son was calm and composed. After he finished eating, his son, who was not at all embarrassed, quietly took him to the washroom, wiped the food particles, removed all the stains, combed his hair, fitted his spectacles firmly. When they came out, the entire restaurant was watching them in dead silence, not able to grasp how someone could embarrass themselves publicly like that. The son settled the bill and started walking out with his father. At that time, an old man amongst the diners there called out the son and asked him, "Don't you think you have left something behind?" The son replied, "No, sir, I haven't." The old man retorted, "Yes, you have. You left a lesson for every son and hope for every father." What do you say about this story, Surya?
Ma'am, the story resonated with me personally, to be honest. It reminded me how my mom takes care of my grandmother. She supports her all the time, and not just financially or physically, but emotionally too. Now, coming to the story, initially I felt sorry for the old father, considering how weak and how he couldn't take care of himself. But then, after I heard how the son took care of his father, cleaned him up, fed him, not minding the disgusted looks that other people in the restaurant are giving him, I realized that old age is inevitable and children are supposed to take care of their parents. And the story also taught me how virtuous it actually is to take care of one's parents when they're old and need our help.
Right. So there's this emotional connect that happens, right? I'm happy with your response, Surya. I have my second story for my students today. My second story goes like this. Rahul and Riya got married a few months ago. One Friday evening, Rahul is late to work. He rushes up to his work with his bag and hurries to the door. There he stops. Calls up Riya and says, I forgot to tell you something. I will be home today at 6:30. Kiran and Ram, my friends, they will be coming with me. They're coming for dinner. So have a good day. Rahul is still talking as he runs down the stairs, but Riya can't hear what he's saying. She closes the door and goes back inside. A dinner party? This is exciting. Kiran and Ram will be our first visitors. But I'm a terrible cook. What can I make for dinner? Let me think. She looks on the internet. She finds many interesting recipes for roasting a chicken. It doesn't seem very difficult to Riya. She follows the recipe from the internet carefully. She does everything what the recipe says. She sets the temperature for the oven and puts the chicken in. She prepares the potatoes and put them in the oven too. Everything is done, and Riya gets some time to relax. When she goes into the chicken, she feels something strange. She thinks, I can't smell anything. When my mom cooks chicken, there's always a delicious smell. It makes me feel hungry. Maybe I should check. Riya takes the chicken and potatoes out of the oven. The chicken is white and cold. The potatoes are raw. Oh no, the oven is broken. I only have snack salad and apple pie. Oh my God. By then, Rahul comes home along with his friends. He looks at Riya. She has tears running down her face. Oh, Rahul, the oven is broken. They have no food to give them. You cooked dinner? But he looks at the chicken and potatoes on the counter. He goes to the oven and opens the door. He puts his hand inside. The oven is cold. He looks at the oven controls and then comes and hugs Riya and says, Did you look at the recipe? Yes, I wrote everything down, the time, the temperature, everything. Rahul laughs. Quickly put the chicken and potatoes in the freezer. We will eat them for tomorrow. I told you this morning that we would buy pizzas on the way home. Kiran is bringing them now. Oh my gosh, says Riya. Thank you. I know you said something, but I didn't hear. So they all enjoy a great dinner party. Riya's salad is good. Everybody likes the apple pie. When Kiran and Ram leave, Riya says to Rahul, we must call the repairman tomorrow, Rahul. The oven is broken. Rahul laughs and hugs Riya. The oven is not broken, my dear. You set the temperature. You did everything right. But you didn't turn the oven on. Oh, said Riya. The recipe didn't say anything about turning the oven on. Yes, Sheema. Are you there? Sheema, are you able to relate anything to this story that I have just narrated?
Ma'am, I'm out of words after listening to the story of Rahul and Riaz. It is so much related to me. Like once when my mom bought a new electric rice cooker home, I was asked to prepare a meal. Then I said everything right and everything was perfect, but I don't know that I had to push the electric button down to allow rice to cook. In every line of narrative, I can see myself here at Ria's place. Ria being so excited for the dinner, planning, preparing, execution of the dinner, and it's so much for organized work. And the story has so much of suspense in it that I thought it would end up with something tragic. But the way the story concluded filled my heart with love for Rahul and Ria. I really enjoy listening to stories which have so many emotions embedded into it.
All right. Yes, there are many who I can see from the chat box also that there's someone who wants to say something about the story. Sir, if you can put your response in the chat box, I think it'll be fine. Bharati Kumar, yes. You can leave your response in the chat box, sir. All right. So let me tell you what happens when you listen to a story. Whatever might be your age, you're transported mentally to another time and place. We all know this delicious feeling of being swept into a story world. You forget about your surroundings. You're entirely immersed. depending on the story you're reading, watching, or listening to. Your palms start to sweat, you blink faster, your heart rate might flutter and skip, your facial expressions shift, and the muscles above your eyebrows will react to the words, a sign which is showing that you're engaged. Ever thought why it happens? Okay, let me explain this. See, when we listen to a PowerPoint with all those bullet points, it so happens there are only certain parts in the brain that get activated. So it hits only our language processing parts in the brain where we decode words into meaning. That's it. Nothing else happens there. But when we are being told a story, things change dramatically. According to researchers, not only are the language processing parts in our brain get to work, but there are other areas in our brain that when we experience the events of the story, even they start to light up. In fact, a story can put the entire brain to work, and yet it gets better. That's the fantastic thing about storytelling. This is growing body of brain science, which in fact offers us many more insights into why it happens. According to researchers like Dr. Ramanathan, who says that when we tell a story, we invoke an emotion. So the receptors that are in the brain, they react to the words we hear or read, and our brains, they are either compelled to compel us to listen to the story or warn against us. So this is the science behind storytelling. By knowing the science, it will make us become more aware and knowledgeable about the stories that we listen to. So here I am today, and I want to take you all through this journey of brain science. Although it's an exhaustive topic in itself, let me try and touch upon the major areas of brain science briefly, right? So yeah, here I go. According to Dr. Uri Hassan, so when you start listening to a story, there are these different areas in our brain, they light up. Okay, so they light up in such a way that when someone is listening to the narrative, not only the networks that are involved in language processing light up, but other neural circuits also. So as the story gets unfolded, there are these brain waves which actually start to synchronize with the storyteller. So this synchronization happens because of what is called as mirror neurons. Okay, mirror neurons. Have you ever had that sensation when you're watching someone do something like, for example, someone is serving a tennis ball, or someone got pricked by a needle, and you exactly feel the same what they must be feeling, as if you're in their shoes. Right? Scientists, they have wondered why we get this feeling, and during the process of this discovery, they came across these neurons, which are called mirror neurons. They fire the same way in the listener and the storyteller when we actually recreate the same emotion and action by ourselves. Okay, so what scientists try to believe is these mirror neurons, they create a kind of sympathy in human beings. And that's the reason they say that immersing yourself in a story narrative activates your mirror neuron system. You set a kind of a visual in your mind's eye of imagination. Okay, so we end up mirroring emotions of the characters. We empathize with it, right? When somebody yawns, when we see someone yawning, we feel the same. Even we feel like yawning. When they are sad, we feel sad. When they are happy, yes, we too feel happy. When someone is telling a story, our brains respond as if we are inside the story ourselves. We feel a powerful connection to the storyteller. I hope I'm right. So technically, let's see what happens. When we are put into an MRI machine, when you listen to a well-told story, the parts of the brain that respond are those that would actually make us feel as if you're inside the story. So when somebody talks about smelling of a roasting coffee, your olfactory cortex lights up. When someone says about grabbing of a pencil, you immediately put your hand and try to pick up a pencil. That's your motor cortex which is responding. Even more impressive is the same effect. The effect also happens to the person who is telling the story. So if the story is being told in live or in person, both the storytellers and the listener's brain start lighting up in sync with one another. This is the magic you feel in a room or in a group. When a story is being well told, the audience is captivated. All right. So another interesting thing that happens is this captivation of action neurons and emotional neurons together form something called neural coupling. Okay, neural coupling. So this is something very interesting that happens. So neural coupling, it's a result of motor and mirror neurons in the brain turning on and off in a special way. So what happens when neural coupling happens? It creates a kind of coherence between the speaker's brain and the listener's brain, as if they are functioning as one. So dear friends, next time when you listen to a story, make sure that you keep your eye on your brains, mirror neurons as well as your motor neurons. Otherwise also it happens anyways. Okay. Next I delve into a chemistry session. Don't be surprised to know that stories tickle reactions in our body and thus work to induce or release certain kinds of hormones that are crucial for human existence. You know, hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, adrenaline, and cortisol, they get released in our body when listening to stories. I feel really excited to know more of this. I hope many of you among there also do feel the same. Let's understand this. When you start to listen to a story, we identify ourselves with the character in the story, right? So we bind to their traits. So oxytocin is that hormone that makes us feel so. Very well, it's also called as wonder drug of storytelling. So in a story, what happens is this oxytocin effects, they occur when we see ourselves in the character. Maybe we see them in our own experiences, our hopes, desires, or dreams that makes the plot. So think back to the time where you might have cried in a movie or while watching a television show. So this is definitely that oxytocin that's having its effect on you. And it is making you to empathize with the characters you're watching. Okay, so oxytocin is one of the brain's most powerful hormone, I tell you. It is what is responsible for what we are now today, that is social bonding, and is often referred as love hormone. So generating oxytocin through storytelling can help to build trust and connection. So we experience a phenomena called transportation. That means we literally happen to meet somebody in their empathetic world because we are very attentive and anxious to join them. So for that entire duration of the story, our fates, they become connected with those of the imaginary people, right? So mark this, next time, if you imagine yourself to be a Harry Potter who can move things with the power of mind, then understand that your oxytocin is at work. Okay, next I move on to something. Let me know something first of all from all of you. You know that feeling when you pick up a novel and the plot immediately pulls you in, compelling you to keep reading? When our palms sweat during a gripping scene of a film? Or that moment when this India-Pakistan match going on, when it's the last over with only 1 wicket in hand and 15 runs to go and your heart is pounding? Could you recollect that sensation? That's cortisol, the next hormone on the list. As you keep listening to the story, what happens is you're able to align with the characters and you wait for some excitement to happen. And if it's a well-told story and you get hooked completely, That is cortisol on work, the hormone that gets released in response to excitement and stress, which is what causes our fight or flight reaction. When we are either happy or scared, we get attached to this hormone called cortisol. We all have a book in hand, or we get to watch a movie or watch the first half of the game, but nothing exciting happens. What will happen? The story get to lose you, right? The story, in fact, loses you. We are all human beings. We crave for adventure. We crave for some action and a sense of risk. No matter whether it's real or perceived, we need some kind of action in our world. Remember, a good story grabs attention and actually helps to focus, putting us in a better position for the content to connect and resonate. Dear friends, next time when you sit with a novel for 2 continuous days in your room and not interested in the outside world, remember that you're hooked by cortisol, the attention grabber hormone. Right? Okay, now I move on to another interesting, the other interesting hormone here, which I can call it as dopamine. Now that we are excited about the story and we have invested in its characters and threats, we naturally seek a desirable resolution that feels us leaving good, right? So this feel-good emotion and our desire for it is the result of neurochemical called dopamine. We know that oxytocin causes us to identify with the characters, binding us to them. And you remember the suspense and cliffhangers that we see in a story? This is what keeps us focused on our stories. Storytellers, they know it so better that they leave us with questions at the end of the series so that we will come back for the answers in the first episode of the next season. So one of the best ways to hold attention is not to reveal the story and keep the audience guessing it. Like, why Katappa killed Bahubali? Whole of India waited for 1 year in the theater, and theaters were packed on the release of Bahubali 2. The reason we do this is due to the dopamine effect in our brains. So dopamine is that hormone which enables our brain to feel focused and motivated to find out the ending. A sense of need and want is invoked as we are compelled to know the ending of the story. So the result of dopamine is it desires for a happy ending, which results in greater focus, higher motivation, and better memory. So it's time for you to recollect the recent movie that you have watched and absolutely loved it, and you want to go back and watch that movie once again. So that's the dopamine effect on you. Right. Now I have an interesting hormone to induce all of you here. We all love to laugh, right? So making someone smile and laugh is one of the greatest storytelling techniques, and introducing humor at the right time and executing it correctly is a sign of a great storyteller. And that's exactly where endorphins get induced. So what are endorphins? Endorphins are these chemicals that are produced naturally by the nervous system to cope with stress or pain. Imagine that you are on a high trek with your friends. You slip off and get hurt. You bleed. Still, you overcome the pain, continue to trek, and enjoy the time off with friends. Right? You witness a humorous comedy show that you can't stop laughing your lungs out, and you see tears rolling down your cheek, but still you don't stop watching that show because you love to laugh. And that's because of endorphin. They're often called as feel-good chemicals because they can act as a pain reliever and happiness booster. So human beings experience endorphins during the storytelling process. So this is the reason what makes storytelling funny and even makes the audience to laugh many a times. So same thing happens when a story makes them sad also. They cry. So endorphin levels in a storytelling, it makes people more creative, relaxed, and focus on the story. Next, try to picture this in your memory, okay, on your mind. You're driving a country road, singing along with your favorite song, cool air rushing through your hair. When out of nowhere, a dog appears in the bend of the road. Before you know what's happening, you swerve to miss it and slam on your brakes. You're breathing hard and fast. Your heart is pounding. Your legs are shaking. Your body is sweating. But your mouth is dry. How did your body, in seconds, go from relaxed driver's seat to full flight mode? You have to thank the adrenaline, the hormone that prepares your sympathetic nervous system to fight or flee, and your body makes it in response to a stress or threat. It's an amazing thing that you have coursing through your bloodstream when you see your favorite character in the story facing some danger or threat. It increases the blood flow in your muscles, releasing sugar into your bloodstream. Now, we might have seen that people doing wonders when they get agitated. So that's adrenaline. So it alerts the body and it fights off the danger or the threat. The same thing that happens when you're witnessing an action in the story. So to have that punch in imbibing a story, adrenaline becomes a must-aware hormone in storytelling. Right? So now you've come across or you have known about the major hormones that get released during storytelling, right? So I have a question for you now. Let me ask you. See, I have something very pretty valuable to sell off. Okay, there's a person who wants to pay 50,000 for that. Okay, and there's another person who wants to pay 75,000 for the same same thing that you want to sell. Whom would you sell your thing off to? Whom would you sell your thing? Is it for the person who is offering you 50,000 or 75,000? You say that it's obvious. It's obvious. We sell it to the person who is willing to pay 70,000, 75,000. But it is not obvious, I tell you, my friends. We don't make decisions just with the rational part of the brain or by hearing a story. Decisions that stick are made with logic plus emotion. And that emotion starts in the amygdala. Latest neuroscience says that decision making starts with amygdala and then moves to orbitofrontal cortex. Simply, decision making is first emotional and then logical. So what is this amygdala? Amygdala is a small almond-shaped section of the nervous tissue that's located on the temporal side of the lobe. So this amygdala is responsible for perception of emotions such as anger, fear, sadness, as well as controlling of aggression also. So the amygdala is that part that helps us store memories of events and emotion so that an individual may be able to recognize similar events in the future. Okay, so it is this amygdala that sends information. It's really notorious, I tell you. It sends information to the other parts of the brain and it prepares the body to either face the situation or to get away from it. I give you a very simple example. Okay, to remember amygdala for your life, this is one best example. If you have ever suffered a dog bite, then the amygdala, what it does is it helps in processing that event. And therefore, when you see dogs around, it increases your fear or alertness around dogs, right? So that's amygdala at work. Okay. Now that you got a brief idea about brain science, okay, let me leave you with art of best techniques in storytelling. But before that, give a pat for yourself, all of you, if you remember the story of Thirsty Crow, because it's you who remembered it is what you feel, but not just you. You have your oxytocin, you have your adrenaline, you have cortisol, you have dopamine, and best of all is amygdala that made you retain that story in your brain, in your memory for such a long time, but not the Pythagoras theorem. All right. So with this, I move on to the techniques, the best of storytelling techniques that you can use it to make your to enhance the quality of your story. Right? So first, I have a technique that's called as monomyth, and this is the well-known technique, and many of us are aware with this model also. It goes like this: you have a hero who starts with a normal situation, faces an ordinary problem. He is met with series of challenges. Each one is more difficult than the previous one. The hero grows stronger during the journey, eventually reaching the final confrontation with the antagonist, and it ends with the hero being rewarded for his efforts. Okay, very simple storyline technique, which is called as monomyth, which we generally see in most of the stories. You have a second technique. I leave you with a second technique called mounted, which is similar to that of monomyth, but you have a structure to it in a form of a mounting, where you have an introduction, a conflict, a rising action, the climax, and a falling action. Okay, so here the end here is similar, though it is similar to that of a monomyth technique. The only difference here is the ending might not always be happy in a mountain technique. Okay, whereas in monomyth, we look for a happy ending there. My third technique is termed as nested loops, where you have two or more stories. You embed each one into another story. Like you begin with one story, which is the main story. You interrupt the story one and start the story two. You interrupt story two and start story three. You may interrupt even that, and many stories can follow. So towards the end of your story, you know what happens is you embed information and suggestions and then move to the next step. So when you're ending the story also, it should be ended in such a way that story number 3 gets finished first, followed by 2, and then the number 1 story. This is also a very interesting technique that we can use to grab the attention. And another most followed story technique is in media res. And we all know this, that a story gets set in the present, but it can be told in the past or future. But the important part is it begins in the present, moves from past to future, and then ends in the present again. So the main character comes back to the present to resolve whatever conflict was created. Right. And my last technique is termed as petal structure, where you have the storyline that moves around so many people sharing stories about the same topic, okay, with different anecdotes and examples. Right. These are the different techniques. So to have a thorough understanding of these techniques, I want to know from my dear students Sheema and Surya. So through an activity, Sheema. So now that you have a kind of techniques that I have shared, could you recollect any of these techniques in the stories that you have watched or movies that you have seen?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to go first.
Please.
Ma'am, I've recently watched this movie called The Pursuit of Happiness. In the movie, life is a struggle for Chris Gardner, who is a single father, who's played by Will Smith. Chris Gardner, due to his losses in business and due to his poverty, gets evicted from his apartment. And after that, he and his young son find themselves alone with no place to go. But even though Chris has landed a job as an intern in a private brokerage firm, the position pays no money. And they both have to live in shelter homes and endure many hardships throughout. But although he struggles so much, Chris refuses to give in to despair, wanting a better life for himself and his son. At the end of the movie, we see that Chris manages to land a permanent job, gaining himself and his son a better life ahead of them. Now, since monomyth is a story type where the protagonist goes through a series of problems and then is set up against the biggest of all problems and has a confrontation with it and manages to succeed, I feel like the story that I just described about Chris Gardner fits perfectly with the story technique of a monomyth.
Very, very good, Surya. So much of relation that you got to monomyth. Yes, Sheema, you want to say something?
Yes. Even I can relate the technique of in media res to the classic movie The Titanic. The story starts out in the present, where a guy heading up a crew of people searching for some kind of treasure in the wreck of legendary Titanic. But during one of the dives, he finds a safe with a drawing of a woman wearing a diamond and nothing else. And he ends up talking about his hunt for the diamond and the discovery of the drawing on the news. And then the movie shifts to show a 100-year-old woman named Rose who talks about what happened in the first and the last voyage of Titanic. And then the movie goes on and taking us back in the year 1912. And I guess it is a wonderful technique that makes you swing between timelines, and I absolutely loved it. I can also relate so many Bollywood movies using these techniques to make their stories much more interesting.
Right. I think with this, I come to the close of this topic, the art and science of storytelling. Thank you, Sheema and Surya, for being with me and trying to make this presentation meaningful. I hope the students who are with us, who joined here the session, you got something out to take home. Use it in the classroom. And the teachers, you have got some ideas and the science behind storytelling. Now you know how to manage your students during your classes, right?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I just want to say that it was a great lecture. Learning about the story types was so fun, and it really feels so good to manage to find few practical examples of theoretical aspects. And thank you so much for great lesson, ma'am.
Thank you, Sheema. So many thanks to the entire ELTAI team, specific to Mohanraj sir, Ilango sir, Ramni sir, and the entire team of ELTAI for giving an opportunity to me and my students to share our knowledge on the topic that's given. Thank
Ma'am,
you.
I would like to say something too.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that it is such a great opportunity to be on a huge platform like ELTAI, and I'm very thankful for Haritha ma'am for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and for being a great mentor too. And I also want to thank Sheema for being a great partner to work with. And finally, a massive thank you to all the organizers at ELTAI for hosting such a great learning event. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The floor over to Maithry.
Thank you, Dr. Haritha. That was indeed a very, very interesting session. I mean, every inch of it, I'm sure the audience enjoyed, and I enjoyed it as well. You began with two very wonderful stories. In fact, you nailed it right for the audience to get into the groove of storytelling technique. And your take on the mirror neurons by Professor Ramachandran was too very interesting to talk about. And in fact, the science behind storytelling, you talked about the release of different hormones and then what each hormone does, the function of each hormone. And it's really nice to understand that, when we listen to a story or when we are watching a movie, all these hormones or some of these hormones are really kindled, and this is the impact, or these are the impacts that we have. And finally, towards the end, the different techniques, the 5 techniques of storytelling were indeed very interesting. And let me look at the questions that we have from the audience.
Yes. Yes, please.
The first question being from Mr. Ramani PN. What is the role of prediction in telling stories? That's a question that he's got. Ramani PN. What's the role of prediction in telling stories? Can you hear me, Dr. Haritha?
Yes, Maithry. So generally, when we are trying to predict something that's going to happen in a story, prediction literally, we are encouraging children, or for that matter, any listener, to actively think ahead and prepare their mind to ask questions. Okay, so we are in fact trying to imbibe this quality among the listeners or the story listeners to understand the story better and to make connections to what they are reading. And also, in fact, I think that gives an opportunity to interact with the text also. So making prediction is a very valuable strategy to improve your presence in the story. I think I hope that answers Ramni sir's question.
I hope.
Yeah.
There's another question from Mr. Ashish. He's trying to say that can we compare the definition of tragedy made by Aristotle with that of the art of storytelling? And what kind of appeal does it have, and how it keeps us invested and hooked to the narration, leading or getting to be one or part of it?
Okay. Well, a lengthy question, in fact, but I will try to touch upon it in parts, the first half and the second half, if I can say. So about the tragedy of Aristotle.
I guess there are connectivity issues. I'm sure the organizers are trying to connect with Dr. Haritha to find out about her connectivity issues. Yeah, we got you back.
Yes, I'm sorry, I lost my connection.
Yes.
I was trying to talk about that question. When we divide the question about the tragedy.
I think we lost her again. Before Haritha connects with us, can we have a question for the audience to just keep the session engaged? What role has a storyteller's personality do with the storytelling and its contents? May I repeat the question? What role has the storyteller's personality to do with the storytelling and its contents? This is from Professor Mohan Raj. So any of you who would be interested in answering could please chat in the chat box. The question, I think some of you haven't listened to the question. The question is, what role has the storyteller's personality to do with the storytelling and its contents? Does the storyteller's personality have an impact to be made on the content or on the story that he's narrating there? Yes, we have some answers there. Unless a storyteller, connect.
Hello, you're able to hear me?
Will not work. Okay, ma'am, are you back? Yeah, right.
Yes, I'm sorry, some technical issue. Yeah, I could hear that question about that storyteller. Could you please repeat that?
Are you going to take this question? This was for the audience to just keep them engaged because there were connectivity issues. Would you like to take another question, or would you go back to the question on Aristotle one?
Yes, I would like to go back to that question on Aristotle.
It's really unfortunate that we have connectivity issues at the other end. Yeah, somebody, some responses here. I can see the storyteller has to set his or her story to create interest among the students. Sometimes the problem in the story should be concluded by the students in a creative manner. Okay. The storyteller should tell the story with gestures. Okay, some interesting responses that we have here. Definitely, unless you become a personality there in the storytelling, the better does not tell a story at all. He better does not tell a story at all. I think we may not be able to get back Dr. Haritha now. I think we are running out of time. So I thank you. I thank on behalf of ELTAI, Dr. Haritha. I thank our two student discussants who have been really, really very participative throughout the session. And I thank the organizing team of ELTAI for giving us this academic feed week after week. And this is the 83rd webinar. I mean, this is not, this is something amazing that ELTAI has been doing. I thank all the participants who have joined from different parts of the country for this very interesting session. So thank you, one and all. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maithry. I should also thank the speaker and the two student discussants. Before winding up, a quick reminder regarding our next webinar. Vinod, could you start sharing our flyer for the next webinar? Yeah. So this is our next webinar on 23rd January 2022. So please do join us on 23rd January, titled Translation as Literary Journal. So Dr. Rajkumar, a professor from Department of English, Delhi University, will be our resource person. And the webinar will be moderated by Dr. Usha, Professor, Department of English, Krishna University, Machallipatnam. So thank you so much for watching today's and attending today's webinar, and looking forward to meeting you all on our next webinar. Thank you so much. Have a great day.